Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spaur, and I have with me a very special guest, and she will introduce herself here in a little bit, but for this month's hero study, I wanted to bring on someone very special to me, someone who I do consider to be a hero in her own right. And this is my partner, Libby, that I talk about so frequently here on this podcast.
Hello, I am the wife.
The wife, yes. Thank you for joining me for this episode.
Having me, even though I'm right across the hall whenever you record these anyway, but
yeah, she usually
it matters to me always.
Yeah, she will usually remind me. It's like, hey, can you turn the fan on? I can hear you through the door. That kind of stuff. I can project. I'm trying to go with a lower canter this time. So
yeah, and I'm trying to project myself. I have a very quiet voice, but we'll make it work.
Yeah, so this is a very special one for me. I honestly did not plan this in advance. It was very fortuitous, but this is going to be coming out on Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, love.
Aww.
I wanted to bring on someone who has had quite the story, and I've been able to see a lot of the ups and downs over these almost 15 years now. And so
of marriage, 16 and a half years of 16 years of knowing each other.
Yeah.
Almost 15 years of marriage.
Yes.
I can do that.
So we'll just go ahead and jump right on in, and I have some questions that we'll just work through and see how many of them we can actually answer.
Yeah. That sounds good.
It's going to be very flexible today.
That sounds good.
So first of all, sweetheart, would you like to give us just some brief snapshots of key points of your life?
So you gave me these questions beforehand, so I had a little bit of time to think about it. And I was thinking, there's going to be a lot of my neurodivergences that comes out in this. I just know, because this is the way I talk about nearly everything. But thinking about, okay, what is an important moment in my life? What does that mean to me? And of course, you have the important points of like our marriage and graduating high school and things like that. But what really stands out as an important moment to me is something that becomes a catalyst for great change. So if I had to pick a handful of those moments that were catalysts, I think I landed on 4. A couple of other little ones mixed in, but I've grown up, spent my whole life with chronic anxiety. That is my biggest mental health issue that does play a very large part in my whole story. So if I were to go back to an important memory that at least has come up a lot in my life, I'm working through challenges, it has come up a lot recently, is actually, I believe, the very first panic attack that I ever had. I think I was only 4 years old.
Really? Mm-hmm. I honestly don't think you've told me about this one.
You know what? You know the story, but it was very recently that I figured out that I think what actually happened was panic attack.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. So the anxiety thing has been ingrained in me my entire life. And yeah, recently being able to say, yeah, I've had panic attacks since I was 4, kind of tells you how my brain developed a little bit in terms of the anxiety. So I call that point number 1. Another aspect of the importance of these moments to me is that, and another thing that colors my anxiety story is that when I look back on my life before some of these moments happened, it's kind of hard for me to think of something good. That, it's those trauma moments you have that stick out in your brain all these years later. Mm-hmm. And so it took me a moment to be like, you know what? what are the important points that actually led to something good? So I tried to pick a little bit of a mixture. Because I can tell you a whole ton of traumatic moments that I don't want to get into right now. And a lot of these moments that I've had also started out with something bad happening, but then good coming from it. So if we were to fast forward to the next chronological moment in my life, we're going to go chronologically just because I feel like it. Mm-hmm. When I was 15, I was a sophomore. I get those years mixed up. When I was 15, it was around the time that fall was ending, winter was coming, less sunlight, very deep into sophomore school year, and a very tough unit in my English class where we were tasked to read the book Native Son. Is an extremely influential book. If you can stomach it, I have heard it's a very good read. I only made it through about a third of it. In fact, I think I heard on a podcast, YouTube short, something that Vice President Harris recommends the book Native Son. That is a book that was really influential to her. So it's a good book if you can stomach it. Rewind back to 15-year-old chronically anxious me who got through childhood getting by, but it was at that point in that unit that everything started to crumble. If you don't know anything about the book, it's got some very violent parts. I had never been exposed to that level of violence kind of in a written form, in something that my brain was completely able to imagine, go with. It ended up with me just hitting a huge moment of depression. And I had already struggled for many years with going through a little bit of depression and worse anxiety when school was not happening. So the Christmas break, summer break, I was always happy to be out of school, have some free time. But that free time also meant that the anxious thoughts would creep up. Anyway.
You didn't have the distraction of your school and classes anymore. I didn't
have the distraction.
Yeah.
So that was the moment that I finally opened up with my family about how bad my anxiety had really gotten. Now, we had talked it over, being kind of the anxious, shy kid for my whole childhood, but it wasn't until that moment when I finally broke down and said, something's wrong. And I was a little bit suicidal, and that was the point in time when we finally said, okay, we're going to look at medication options. Now, I was only 15. That's usually don't go with the full strength medications until you're 18. I mean, I'm not a medical professional, but it worked out very well for me. That was a very dark Christmas, unfortunately. It's still, it hangs as this there's a blackness to it in my brain when I go back to that Christmas. But the catalyst of change, I was finally medicated. I got out of that unit in English. I really did try my best. I tried to read this book, but when it got too much, I basically excused myself when that unit was up and went and did study hall for a while. So that was a point where, hey, I have a word to put to this. I have clinical anxiety. I have medication to help. The last 2 years of high school went so much better. Going forward to my next important point, alongside the anxiety, over many years, I would say ever since going through some therapy, I studied psychology, mental health is really important to me. And being introspective within myself is also important to me. So I've been able to connect the dots on what's gone in through my childhood, what's going on now. One of the things I learned about myself that I think everyone can relate to is that there is some kind of negative voice in your head that's relentless, but it says different things for everybody.
It's those self-limiting beliefs I keep talking about.
Self-limiting beliefs, yes. It's so ingrained in your subconscious and your unconscious mind that you don't even perceive it as speaking. It's just a part of who you are. And so it's extremely hard to identify until you kind of work your way through it, figure it out. One of the negative tapes, the negative messages that would play in my head growing up and through school is that I was never good enough to be number one. Mm. I was always only good enough for second place. And I don't think it was until not that long ago, to be honest, sometime within our marriage, that I discovered what that voice was and started to uncouple what that meant and go back through my childhood to see all of the different points where I felt like second was the best I deserved. Second was all that I was ever given, even after trying my hardest and feeling like I put in effort to be number one. Still only getting number two. I could go into a tangent on that for hours, but I won't. One point in my life where I do feel like I earned first place and I was able to show it was graduating from college. During the graduation ceremony, I was not, summa cum laude. I was a good student, but average grades for a good student. There came a moment where I'm looking at, during this ceremony, the summa cum laude students get to bring in the flags and they get recognized. And I'm just in the crowd. But there was one moment where I did not know this was coming. And the keynote speaker said, I want to recognize the people who put in the effort to gain more than 1 degree today, which was me. I double majored in psychology and neuroscience, earned 2 degrees, 2 bachelors on that day. And they said, if you were earning more than 1 degree today, stand up. And I was one of, I believe, 3 people in that entire auditorium that stood up. That was a far, far smaller number than the summa cum laude students. That was a point in time where I actually felt like I got first place. I hold that as that was the pivotal moment where I was done with my education at that point. I did not get accepted to grad school, which turned out okay. Because I actually think I would have burned out if I had gone to grad school and would not have been happy. So that was my final moment in my education, and I finally got to say, hey, in this aspect, I actually was number one. So that was pretty cool.
That is a good story.
Thanks. I worked really hard for it.
You did. You worked really hard for it.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people who get asked this question might say, oh, well, my wedding day was really important in my important point. And it was. But in the confines of the definition I'm trying to give it, our wedding was not a catalyst of change because we had been preparing for it for quite a while. We knew how it was going to happen.
That's
we knew
true.
We had already gotten our apartment. We were ready for it. So the actual catalyst of change that I would call the important point is the day that I met you.
Are you talking the
actual day that I met you or the day after?
Yeah.
What? It's a long story, but we met at our collective best friend's wedding at the time.
My best friend from the first grade
yeah.
was getting married. I was one of his groomsmen, and
I went to college with him and his soon-to-be wife, and they were good friends. So it's it's one of those movie magic stories where it's like, oh, we met at our best friend's wedding, and then we ended up together. Like, okay, that actually did happen, but...
It actually did. It could be a rom-com.
It does happen. Yeah, it really could. But,
In fact, I think I told some aspect of that story on the 4-parter sharing my story.
Probably.
It's one of my favorite stories to tell.
Probably, yeah. So we very first met the night before, which happened to be Halloween. So I don't count it because we were technically in costumes.
We were in costume. When I saw you on the dance floor, I didn't even recognize you. Mm-hmm. And I was dressed up as Master Chief, so I had a helmet on unless I was eating or tired of having the helmet on. So
I don't really count that.
Yeah.
Because we didn't actually meet.
We didn't really meet then.
The actual moment in time was, yes, you did ask me to dance. And we hit off a very sweet little conversation. That was one point in time where I had a nagging thought in my mind that said, hey, I need to keep in touch with this guy. There's something different about him. And so the fact that the sign of the times, we didn't even actually exchange phone numbers. We exchanged Facebook information and friended each other on Facebook before we did anything with phones. We are such millennials.
Such millennials.
But
at the same time, to a certain degree, that was almost like safer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was safer because you weren't giving out your personal cell phone or anything like that. Mm-hmm. God, now I just get calls and texts from random strangers all the time. All the time.
Yep. So I'd call that next moment.
And I know I've already shared this story before, but with all of the music that was playing when we were dancing, I completely thought she was going to become an astronaut.
Oh yeah.
Because or like, I don't know, maybe someone who works in aeronautics, because I thought she said aeroscience, not neuroscience.
Neuroscience. Yep.
I still laugh at that.
I'm gonna be an astronaut. No. I think my last moment would be... Well, no, I have two, but I've already been answering this question for so long.
No, that's fine. That's fine. These ones tend to be longer anyways.
My next defining moment that I pick anyway is the time that you did convince me to come with you to a little D&D session where you were going to start running a campaign and you wanted me to be there.
You had been invited over and over. You had this open invite, and I kept coming home. And I kept coming home. Sometimes at midnight, she was already in bed, and I would just talk her ear off about everything that Ravane and the party was getting into, all the shenanigans. Sometimes, I wouldn't fall asleep until like 1 or 1:30 because I was just, there was so much I wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm. But I don't remember what made me say yes. I honestly don't, but it was Halloween. Again. Apparently most of my moments happen around Halloween.
Apparently. You came and you were playing an NPC character.
That was your guys' actual finale.
That was the actual finale.
Strahd.
Curse of Strahd.
Curse of Strahd. I was playing an NPC.
First character she played, mostly a spellcaster. Not the most ideal, but we made it work.
Sorry. Well, you guys coached me through how to do it.
A lot of coaching.
I didn't know how to play. My one funny story about that is you had been regaling me with stories about your campaign through Curse of Strahd. My character, I'm assuming Esmeralda is an NPC.
Yes.
Within the campaign setting?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was playing Esmeralda. Esmeralda was the first one in the door. And the first one to cast... I rolled highest on the initiative. Esmeralda was the first one through the door to actually attack Strahd. It's like, you have been regaling me with that story about a year and a half. about how you're going to go after Strahd. And here's little me, never playing D&D before, actually get the first... I just find that really funny. But, like, okay, things changed all of a sudden.
Hey, Esmeralda had a lot of reason to bring him down, too, so
yeah.
it makes sense for the character.
Yeah. Anyway. But that was the change of, oh, okay, this is fun. These people seem nice. You were right about that, because you had been telling me, and I had been saying no for 3 years, I think.
Something like that, because it started when I was in the nerd herd as well. But as soon as she got in there, just like a gelatinous cube, we just grabbed her and brought her in, and she was really a part of the gelatinous cube.
Really. And I think the difference is things had changed enough to where you were already very comfortable with these people. Mm-hmm. And you knew that I would be too. I think if I had said yes to being part of the original Nerd Herd, probably would have been too overwhelmed. But the group of people that have become our regular players...
They are our chosen family.
Best friends, yeah. They are our second family.
They are the family that we have chosen.
And so the thing that makes this such an important point for me is that I had not actually fallen in love with a group of people in an incredibly long time.
Not since college.
Yeah. Which was about 15 years ago, I think, when I first met that group of friends, which led me to meeting you through that group of friends. So about 15 years of not having a very solid friend group. No wonder I was socially anxious. I was still overcoming some of my other anxieties just through learning about myself.
Yeah.
Learning what was going on. So the fact that I was finally in a place to be ready to reach out and become a part of this group of people was a big catalyst of change in my life, because all of a sudden, people matter to me a lot more than some other things used to matter to me. And I let go of a lot of things that don't matter in order to focus on the people and the friendships, the relationships. It changed everything. It was a big risk in some ways. And I know that the outcome for so many people just does not end up this way, unfortunately. So I consider myself extremely lucky that these people also respect us the same way that we respect them and love them, and we all support each other. It's not an easy thing to come by, and I get that. But a very, very big change.
Yeah, and the only way you're going to find those kind of friends is if you keep looking.
Yeah. I think the last moment that I'd wanted to pick out was from last year, which I am certain you have talked about so much on the podcast already. I am sure that you have. Unfortunately, a snowball effect of deciding to resign from a job that I had held for almost 13 years. And a job that I was very comfortable in and was really good at, was respected at. The snowball of that, coupled with, well, now what am I going to do? We had some plans in the works, which is probably going to come up in one of your later questions.
Probably.
And also trying to tackle what I didn't realize was the biggest part of my anxiety, which was the obsessive compulsive disorder aspect of it. I didn't have enough words surrounding that concept, that aspect of my anxiety, to know how to deal with it. Those two things kind of happen hand in hand, which just kind of caused everything to implode all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of, unfortunately, an extremely low point in my life. What made it a little bit different from when I was 16 is that my support group was a little wider. I had some words to be able to explain exactly what was going on rather than just knowing something was wrong. I knew more about what was wrong. I just didn't know how to fix it. It was an extremely hard year. But, well, that was last year and part of this year. So it's been about a year and a half since the initial implosion.
Yeah, that was 2023. Mm-hmm. 2023 was a year of hell.
Yeah.
And we managed to navigate through it.
We did.
We still have some things that we're working through, but that was a really, really dark and rough time.
Yeah.
So the next question that I have is, and you kind of have already touched on this, what is something in your life that you have overcome?
So I thought I would just kind of continue into this, my perspective of this story of what's happened over the last year and a half, which is starting with at my old job, seeing the writing on the wall, seeing the tower starting to crumble, not knowing exactly when the moment was that I needed to get out of there. But I reconnected with my former boss, who had left about a year earlier, which was probably one of the first stones to come out to start this tower from crumbling. We tried to set up things to keep me sane and keep me running, and those protections really only lasted about 9 months, I think, before I started to see what was really starting to go on. So it was, I guess it really was about a year later that, through talking with my former boss, to deciding to put in my resignation. But for someone who doesn't like to deal with big changes all at once, that was a pretty big change. And also trying to tackle my mental health. This was also when we were still navigating how to run a small business. And it was just overwhelming. And it was so overwhelming to the point where I unfortunately shut down. I unfortunately did have a little bit of suicidal ideation. It never got bad enough to the point where I needed intervention, but I won't deny that the trains of thought that my brain decided to go down with particular options, that was one of them. I think it's kind of probably a pretty natural thing to have to think about, or you will think about when you're faced with a desperate situation. Having the support structure that I did, I know you call me the hero for coming through this. Honestly, I couldn't have done it without key people in key places. Mm-hmm. One of them being you. That you helped take care of me. We had my mom stay with us for a couple weeks just to help, because I was pretty non-functional other than just existing and trying to work through the fears.
Yeah, we even called the suicide hotline one day. I remember that. And we pressed into what we call our fellowship. Mm-hmm. The group that we play D&D with, we call ourselves the Fellowship of the Dice. Mm-hmm. And they were very supportive and were very willing to come around and help during that time.
It was times when I remember having a particularly bad day and you were very busy, so I went grocery shopping with one of our friends because I just needed someone.
Because it got so bad for a while that the nature of the calls that I have with my clients, I do need to maintain confidentiality. So I've got this door closed.
You're closed off.
I've got the fan running, and there were times where just that right there was enough for her
barrier.
to feel like she didn't have that connection. And she would, go grocery shopping with a friend. There were times she would just go up to a library that this same friend worked at and
just hang out.
Yeah, would just hang out. And
knew there was someone else in the room that...
Someone else in the room that loved and cared for you and was keeping an eye on you. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was so much leaning into the support systems. The thing that actually started to get me out of it was getting the proper therapy.
That's important. Proper therapy. We tried something and it made matters worse.
Yeah. We tried a form of OCD therapy kind of through an online program. It did not work for me and it made things worse. I did not have the proper structure for what kind of OCD that I have. I didn't know that well enough in order for this particular kind of therapy to work for me. I'm not really going to talk about what it is because I think it works for some people. Didn't work for me. Of course, I'm not a mental health professional, but the thing that did work for me and the thing that for me was a pivotal change in how my anxiety is handled is, I guess, because I've been through talk therapy for years. Talk therapy is incredibly useful for a lot of different mental health things. It helps me put constructs to things that were going on in my brain. But most talk therapists aren't specialized. They may have specializations in anxiety of itself and be able to do some OCD therapy. The pivotal change for me was going to someone who that was their one specialty, going through OCD therapy. She was able to talk me through how to define my OCD. There's different kinds, and give me tools in order to regulate and manage what OCD is doing in my brain. And the particular kind of therapy I went through is called, it's ICBT, which is different than CBTI, but it's ICBT, inference-based cognitive behavioral therapy. CBTI, I believe, is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. I think that's the other one.
I mean, I had a book that was
You
CBTI.
did. Yeah. So this one is ICBT, inference-based cognitive behavioral therapy. So what that looked at, there's pretty much two major kinds of OCD therapy. And the other one we're pretty much all familiar with is exposure therapy, which is, okay, if you have arachnophobia, you get exposed to spiders. And you figure out how to be in a room with a spider, and then eventually how to touch a spider. And, that's exposure therapy. It's hard. It is extremely hard to go through exposure therapy. If exposure therapy, which is what I was trying to go through initially on my own, basically was a kind of exposure therapy, that's boiling it down a little too much, but if you don't know how to do it right, you end up causing yourself more trauma than solving the problem. It's part of the reason that I kind of fell on my face one day and we realized this isn't working. So the inference-based method doesn't take you through exposure so much as you take a really deep look at how you are actually processing your thoughts. And it's funny, for pretty much any kind of therapy I've ever gone through, it's really hard for me to put into words specifically how I've been able to overcome each of these steps. And the same is true for the inference-based work, because it's extremely hard for me to say, what tools do I use to get over my OCD? Well, it's automatic now. I wish I could tell you a little bit more with specific examples. I probably could. But the idea boils down to getting your brain convinced that the thing that you're afraid of, the worst case scenario that you're trying to prepare for, the countless worst case scenarios that your brain can come up with, that there is no logical bridge from where you are to where they are. And you can't leap that gap either. You're missing a piece of data that would be your bridge. And I get that that's probably a little bit of an abstract concept, because it kind of is. And you have to get familiar with it and have practice with it in order to understand, oh, I'm missing this piece of data that actually gets me from point A to point B. So point B, don't even worry about it. So I have been able to look up some tools online. There's a really cool kind of like iceberg glacier image you could probably find. It gives you a little bit of an idea of what your brain consciously tells you versus everything else that subconscious and unconsciously is tying into the reason that you're saying, oh, I'm scared of this, it must be possible, so I should be afraid of it. And that feedback loop, it all feeds into the same way of thinking. And when you can break that cycle and break that feedback loop, there's your key. Like I said, it's really hard for me to really be detailed about how to actually explain these. One thing I learned through some of my anxiety, learning about anxiety in general, is that I think a lot of people might have an OCD component to their anxiety that can largely go unexplored. And if you're managing your anxiety fine, great. But again, I'm not a mental health professional, but if it seems like there's a piece of the puzzle missing to you getting a handle on your anxious thoughts, those feedback loops, having it come up over and over again, might be a sign that an OCD component exists in your story, and it might benefit you to look at some of these resources. Because I can tell you that years and years of talk therapy has not gotten me nearly as far as this 1 year that I did this ICBT. So if you're spinning your tires a little bit, it might be worth looking into, if that's a part of your story. I
think if we were to put just an umbrella statement over this entire thing here, is it's best if you don't try and do this on your own, and it's best if you don't try and either Google or WebMD your way through it. Talk with someone who is qualified and a specialist. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that Libby has shared here, I have witnessed with some clients that I've worked with, and I've brought up, it's like, hey, I'm seeing these parallels in your story compared to some of my experiences here, but I cannot diagnose you with OCD. Right. I cannot diagnose you with anxiety. You need to speak with someone who is a professional. Yeah. And I am all
We're not licensed for that.
I am all for finding a mental health professional who will give you the support that you need. They are out there.
Yeah,
they are out there. Keep trying to find them. Mm-hmm. It takes about 4 sessions. 4, if I get my hand on the camera there. It takes about 4 sessions for you to know if you're going to work well with someone. So if after 2, 3, or 4 sessions you're like, man, I really don't think this is working, then it's okay to say, I don't think this is working. I need to go somewhere else.
I'm going to double down on that too, because the other half of the equation that actually made a big difference for me was changing up my medication.
Yeah.
I have been on an anti-anxiety medication since I was 15. And one thing I have learned through this process, if a regular antidepressant is not cutting it, now there's a lot that goes into that, so obviously lots of discussions with your doctor about it. I can give my take on it. A lot of people within my family struggle with these kinds of mental health issues. And so I had been having conversations with my family about the kinds of medications that we all take. And where I was feeling a little bit stuck. So realizing I've had chronic anxiety my entire life. This is not a season of depression. This is not a season of getting through it. This has been my entire life. I know people who are pro-medication. I know people who only would use the medication as a very last resort. They would rely much more heavily on therapy. And therapy is an incredibly important aspect of that, because that is where you're going to get to the root of the problems that your subconscious, your old memories give you a lot of answers to things you want answers on. I'm getting sidetracked here. But anyway, so medication is obviously a very personal choice. Medication works very well for me because of the fact that my brain has been predisposed to this my entire life. It runs in the genes. A lot of my family struggles with the same things. But, so for myself, feeling stuck, going to my primary doctor and kind of getting there's not really anything I can do. I was already on the maximum dosage of my regular antidepressant. I personally was not comfortable changing it because I'm on a very specific kind of antidepressant that targets multiple things. Switching is not as much of an option. But after talking to my family, there were other things I could add too. And what I learned is that through talking with my doctor and deciding to reach out specifically for a psychiatrist, I learned that it's not uncommon for primary care doctors to just feel out of their element and not comfortable messing around with mind medication. Antidepressants are kind of their go-to. They have been widely used, widely researched, fairly safe. But anything above and beyond that, a lot of primary physicians, just family care, your general doctor, they might not be comfortable doing that. And that's what I ran into, is that, okay, she's not comfortable with that, so I will find someone who is. And so I did find a psychiatrist who we talked for quite a while. She was comfortable taking me through this journey of adding to. It's a very personal thing, because I know for me, I am quite lucky that I don't have a lot of side effects. I don't really have contraindications where some people might. It is something that you just have to be very clear with how your mind is going to accept medication. But anyway, all that to say, I looked at what my family was taking, and I looked at my options. I looked at what I could potentially add to. We came up with some things, and I do take a few different kinds of medication now. I don't really want to share names. I took, I started with a couple different things. We found the right dosages that made me feel pretty good. It wasn't until we added the very last one, which I kind of said, hey, multiple members of my family have said adding this particular medication was a game changer for them. And it ended up being a game changer for me too. And so adding that medication, which I think I started taking at the beginning of the year, coupled with all of that therapy, so both sides of that coin, that everything suddenly kind of went on autopilot again, and everything was okay, and everything was tackleable. I was able to make a huge breakthrough on not dwelling on the worst case scenarios anymore. So here I am, quite lucky in that it took about a year, a little over a year, about a year, to work through all of that and get to the point where things feel stable, things feel good. It will never be easy, but it's manageable. So I would say that's at least the latest of the biggest things I've overcame. And I couldn't have done it without you and family and things like that.
One of the things that's very amusing when you're talking about overcoming some kind of big struggle in your life, our brains are not that great at remembering our successes. Yeah. And so usually the latest thing is the worst and terrible thing that could happen, and then you get through that. It's like, okay, whew, all right, I'm glad I made it through that. But then the next time something similar comes around, your brain doesn't remember you already did something like that, and oh my god, this is the most terrible, worst possible thing that could happen.
That reminds me that over the last several years, probably ever since we decided to leave the church, if you want to talk about a timeline of events, mm-hmm. We decided to leave the church about 1 month before the lockdowns of the pandemic. It did happen before. Finding this group of friends, uncoupling a lot of the baggage that had come from religious trauma. I slapped that label on. I had a very fine childhood. Like, nothing crazy bad ever happened. I had a family who was struggling with this child who couldn't put to words what was really going on in her brain because she didn't understand it. What's the best a family can do in that point? You know? But the traumas that came about from my anxiety, from church, from school. It's not like I grew up being abused or things like that. Like, that's actually not really part of my story. We all have moments where bad things happen, but that wasn't something that I had to walk out of. So leaving the church, getting a group of friends, uncoupling the religious baggage, getting really close with this group of friends and realizing, having a community of people in my life who care about me and I care about them is pretty precious. I have been able to articulate a couple of things I guess I've developed as philosophies in my life. And I'm sure that I'm not the first, and they probably have names that I don't know about. But you talking about our brains forgetting so easily. One of the philosophies that I have been able to articulate is this idea that your perspective changes and things almost become more comfortable when you are able to step outside of them and look inward rather than be in there. So the way that I visualize this, if you're a visual person, this is how I visualize it, is that when you have a construct in your life, there's a set of beliefs, and for a lot of things, not everything, but for a lot of things, there's also fears. So I will use organized religion as an example. I could put the label of evangelical Christianity on it, or Christianity in general, but I don't want to get too into the weeds here. But say you have a core set of beliefs, and you probably also have some core fears about those beliefs as well. And so the way I would visualize it is that I'm living inside a snow globe. When I'm inside the snow globe and there's a blizzard going on, you think that that's your entire life. Your entire life is the blizzard. That's all you can perceive because you're in it. When you push through the blizzard and you touch the wall of glass and you say you can walk through the wall of glass. Let's say you can walk through that wall of glass. All of a sudden you're on the outside of it and you're looking inward. You can say, oh, this is organized religion. Now that I'm outside of it and I'm holding it in my hands, that's where the decoupling can start to happen. So for instance, things like, I know this isn't necessarily a deconstruction podcast, but this is an example that I frequently think about a lot. Now that I'm outside the sphere, I'm actually learning more about it, if that makes sense, because I have different perspectives. I can hold the ball like this. I can hold the ball like this. I'm not stuck in there anymore. So, and it's more comfortable out here because there's no blizzard. So that's the way that I visualize it. If another way that I think about it is that I feel like there's extreme power and freedom when you know how to label something and to know that it has a name. So that's the way that I think about it in a non-visual way. So my example in organized religion is I went through 30 plus years of being a Christian and living inside that snow globe. There wasn't always a blizzard, but there was a blizzard at the time I decided to push through and step out. And it wasn't until I saw the sphere from this side that I learned there's a name for the death of Jesus called substitutionary atonement. So I stepped out of it and learned that belief, that story, has a name. And then all of a sudden I was able to say, oh, well, now that I know that, I can look at it from different angles. It didn't necessarily change my belief, but it widened my view of what that could mean, what it does mean, other perspectives on it. I feel the same way about mental health struggles. Once I'm able to say, oh, I have chronic anxiety, I have OCD, I was able to put names to those things, and it opened me up to a community of, other people who struggle with the same things, able to do research and figure out things that have worked for people, things that didn't. And being able to label these things actually makes it more comfortable to tackle them. When you're on the outside of it, you're warm, you're safe, you're not in the blizzard. You have to push through the fear, which sucks. And I know it does.
You could almost say that the fear is the glass.
Yeah.
The fear is the barrier.
I like that.
It's the wall that is holding you in, but as soon as you can push through that, you get a new perspective. It's a good analogy.
Yeah. I like it.
Though the entire time you're talking about the snow globe and everything, I was just envisioning like a magic 8-ball where it's like, you know, is this the worst possible thing that's ever happened to me? Shake it around. Ask again later. Damn it.
Yeah. That sounds about right. Most definitely. Shit.
You need to have the answer. You've been through this before.
And I will say that sometimes you don't need a specific label, because here's the other side of that coin. I would not be surprised if I did go through the process of getting tested for autism. Would not be surprised if I had a positive result. I'd like to think that I have enough charisma and presence in front of other people to know that if you were to look at me and talk to me, yeah, you probably would think, no, not at all. If you knew some of the weird thought patterns that I had and some of the weird things, my weird habits, a lot of those are going to tick some of the boxes in autism. I don't have the desire. I really kind of don't have the resources to go through that kind of testing. It's not going to change my philosophy on a lot of things in order to have that label, because in a way I already have it. I'm able to use that label whether or not I can be classified as autistic or not. It doesn't change the fact that I can still see parallels within myself and find resources in order to gain skills to deal with things that are difficult that might check the autism boxes. So you don't have to be certain in order to still research and use resources. So just because you haven't gotten diagnosed with one of these things, if you see parallels within yourself and find resources to help cope with those, then go for it.
So my next question for you, love.
What are we only on number 3?
Yes.
This is going to be a long one. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I kind of expect that for these.
Yeah.
Who is someone who has helped you get to where you are today?
So I had 2 answers to this. I think both of them will be somewhat brief. One of them is you.
The whole point of this question is I'm fishing for compliments.
I know,
Go
right?
on.
I know, right? And I mean, oh, well, you're my husband. Of course, you've done so many things in my life. It's like, okay, all of that is true. However, the one thing that you did, how did you phrase the question again? Helped you get to where you are today. So we met my final semester in college. You were recently graduated. It was another thing where I didn't have the revelation until much later, but I was stuck in a mindset of being pretty negative and judgmental at the end of college. Still trying to be a good person, but it wasn't until a lot later that I realized that I could even kind of have somewhat Karen tendencies. I wasn't to ask for the manager type, but I was a little bit judgmental about people where that judgment was not warranted at all. And points of probably expecting perfectionism, because I expected perfectionism in myself, that I've expected perfection from other people and got mad when I didn't get that. You were the one who helped me break free of that mindset. And I wish I could give you some concrete examples off the top of my head. I can't think of anything specific, but I do remember times where you questioned me on why I said things that I said about people, why I reacted to a particular situation in certain ways. And you said, why? What was the purpose of doing that? What was the purpose of saying that? And you got me to step out of those expectations and realizing that humans act like humans.
There is a reason why I do talk about expectations a lot on this podcast, because so many of us, we are just driven by oftentimes unspoken and even unconscious expectations of how someone's supposed to act, how something is supposed to go. And I have to remind myself, check your expectations, check my expectations.
Yeah. And so it was able to really open up the sense of compassion that I can have for other people. There are very few things about what other people do and say that bother me like they used to. People are just trying to get through life. And me putting those unwritten expectations on people who are just trying to get through life, you taught me how to hone that skill. And I know that I would not have the relationships that I do today without having that skill and having you check me on it. I don't think we would have as good of a relationship if you didn't check me on that, because what kind of unwritten expectations would I have compiled over years and years with you that just, yeah.
And how many would I have compiled toward you?
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, so I would definitely say that. I think the other person who I would call a particular hero in my life would be my former boss and now my business partner, Josie, because she helped walk me through the transition from old job to new job working with her. That was one of the biggest catalyst in me resigning, was that we spent a lot of time discussing how we could work together in the same line of work, but as contractors. She was the one who basically said, we can do this, let's do it, I'll help you. If I didn't have her to walk me through this next step of my career, I would probably still be stuck at my old job thinking I had no way out. Because I honestly still believe, even though I know you and other people say it, that I have more broad skills than I think I do, but I have a very narrow niche job that is not something you're just gonna look up on Indeed and see. It's a very, very specific job, and I have been working at that job for almost 15 years now. So I am a little bit set in my ways. It's just the notion, I think, of the hurdle from going from my particular job to a different kind of job within the same industry. I work with a lot of databases. I do some pretty technical stuff. The skills that I have, the software that I use, doesn't translate to a general database manager. It's very specialized pieces of software. So for me to say, oh, I'm a database manager, and pick up a database manager job, the actual crossover of the tools that I would use is very small. That's what I mean by that. Luckily, that she's now a business partner, our skill sets work very well in tandem with each other. She loves to be the front face and have all the fun talks and be the idea person, and she doesn't really like working in the really nitty-gritty details unless she has to, and she She knows that I am capable of building systems for clients and getting them up and running with what they need. And she just helps set the parameters for me, and then I do all the back end stuff. And that is where I'm happy. I love building tools. I love building systems that work for clients, usually using tools they already pay for. And that's my favorite part of it, is that you guys are already paying for this. Let's actually use it the way it's intended to be used. And you don't have to pay a dime except for the consulting fees.
Well, and one of the things we can say about Josie is she was also very compassionate and patient.
Yes, she was very
during
patient.
2023.
Yes, she was. She put up with me being stuck for weeks, and she hung in there, and she stuck it out with me. I would give her updates about once a week, and we knew we would get there. I wasn't back to working my full hours until probably, well, because we had a bit of a slow period this summer, so that doesn't count. Consistently working my full hours probably at the end of this summer, so just a few months ago.
Yeah.
She was patient with me that entire time because I had to build up my stamina, having fallen so hard. I had to build up my stamina again in order to be able to work full time. She worked with me through that challenge. She's worked with me through so many challenges of being a small business owner. Now that I'm on this side of it, I can say it's kind of a glorified term for what I do. Do I know how to run a small business as a small business owner? Well, I know what paperwork we need to file for the two of us, and I still get up and do my job on time. If you were to ask me to go open a retail store, I'd be like, I don't know the first thing about that. But anyway, that was a blizzard and glass I had to step through. It was like, oh my God, can I give myself the title of small business owner and actually feel comfortable with that? And we're about 80% of the way there.
So this is one of the questions that I'm really looking forward to asking pretty much everyone that I interview. That question is, what is something that you enjoy doing that you just come to life doing?
This is another one where I have two answers for you. And one of them I've had my entire life, and one of them I have recently gotten. The one that I've had my entire life is that I have a driving need to be creative. And that takes its form in many, many different ways.
It has evolved over the years,
evolved.
you could even say.
I have added to it every year. But I love to create things. You know, I've done countless kinds of crafts. You know, your standard things, crocheting, painting, drawing. But I also I really like to do unique things. So I like to put myself in what I create and in my environment. Like these doors back here. I love mid-century architecture and design. So I have been turning elements of our house into ones that have more of a mid-century flair, and those doors are one of them. And I can't see them very well, but yeah, you know what I'm talking about with like the lines and the different wood tones. You can kind of see what I'm going for. So I've done a lot of woodworking. I still have many plans for this house that I'm going to do eventually, maybe. And but yeah, driving me to create, and I enjoy making very unique things that are meaningful. By this point, it will be after Christmas, so I can say that I'm almost finished with a painting for my mom for her 70th birthday. It's not just a painting anymore. I did oil painting in high school for multiple years, and I really enjoyed it. I don't paint a whole lot, but when I do paint, I do a painting every few years. I put my heart and soul into it, so I wanted to do a painting for my mom that is It's a place in Sweden that I discovered because we're Scandinavian. She wants to go to Sweden one more time while she's still alive. And it's funny, I was helping my dad. I was setting up his birthday present, which we got him an Oculus Quest, because it all centers around this travel thing, because my dad unfortunately can't travel anymore. He's got too many medical things he's got to deal with. And so I thought, well, can we bring the travel to him? So we got him set up with an Oculus Quest, and I think the app is called Wander, where it's basically Google Maps, but you can kind of move around like a person. And as I was wandering around Sweden after helping to get him set up with his Oculus, making sure everything was working, I stumbled across this street in Sweden that had the cutest little cottages and everything, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's gonna be my mom's birthday present. And so, I've got the story to tell. I made the wood, I handmade the frame out of some wood that I had, and everything. Like, it's important to me to put some artistic soul into it, and that I have this skill in order to be able to make a canvas from scratch. Like, knowing that I was able to do everything from scratch, making the frame, stretching the canvas, doing the gesso, and making the wooden frame to go with it. It's like I'm able to put my whole heart into this thing for my mom's 70th birthday. It's like, those are the kinds of things that are really meaningful to me. And I can't do that for everything, but this year I decided to get into dice making. I really wanted to make custom dice. And you guys spoiled me rotten for my birthday, getting me most of the things I needed in order to make dice. And it still took me months in order to be able to be ready to actually start pouring dice, which I have started. And they're looking excellent, though, and I'm so happy with them. They take so much time and so much effort, but the plan is I also wanted to make our friends a unique set of dice and continue to make very unique sets of dice for my friends. It's like, it's not quite worth it to me unless the soul is in it. And I also know that I'm just not happy if I don't have things to create and work on. Other thing is picking up D&D. That's totally it. I have fallen into the gelatinous cube that is D&D. It will envelop you, and if you find the right players to play with, it does become a part of your life. Like, it is part of my life now, playing D&D with friends. It's
I would say that there was a while, especially during 2023, where that was like the only thing you had to look forward to.
Mm-hmm. It kept me going through the week when I could come Saturday, be able to see friends. I was also building the gaming table at that time. I made a custom gaming table with a built-in TV for our friends because I'm weird like that. But like, that was another thing, is like, this is for the fellowship. This is for the community. This is for things that give me life. I can keep working on this and keep my mind off of other things because this is extremely life-giving, and it's going to be something for everyone to use. And yeah, playing D&D, it really is hard to describe. Like, okay, you can call us uber nerds. Well, you already knew that. Like, freaking posters on the wall. It's a way, I mean, I can say the cliche things. It's a way to live out your fantasies. It's I don't know, I guess that's the one cliche I think I had to say that. You get to live out your fantasies. When you have people you trust to play with you, you get to explore parts of your psyche that you don't normally get to think about in your day-to-day. You get to explore relationships that you don't get to have and what those kinds of dynamics would be like. You have to be a respectful person, and you have to understand boundaries and where we use lots of safety tools, but where your lines are that won't get crossed, but I mean, I don't mind sharing that my character has a relationship with another character in the campaign, and that's not you. And so it
can't be me.
Well, yeah, you're the GM.
Yeah. I guess it could if it was an NPC. It could be an
NPC, but
I'm already playing an NPC who is in a relationship with one of the other characters at the table.
Yeah. And
it was a whole thing.
Yeah. And I can't tell you how fascinating and interesting and just cool it is to be able to explore a different relationship through my character's lens with a different person and just play out what that would be like. Our games are typically they're in the world of online D&D campaigns, our campaign's pretty tame. And we keep things tame on purpose. Like, yeah, no super weirdo stuff in our games. But yeah, exploring a different relationship with a different character is just been really fascinating. It's brought a different aspect to the character that I've played for 2 years now. It's just super fun to explore. Like, what really would she do? Your characters are always going to have a part of yourself. Like, yeah, my main character, she's got a lot of me in her. I think that's just the way that goes. But so I'm also exploring ways of healing through playing out my character, because she's got those parts of me that I'm trying to heal. Why not start to heal through the role play? And you develop deeper relationships with your friends, and you just have fun too, because I mean, they are scenarios that you don't get to play, like you're basically playing Lord of the Rings in your mind and
in space.
In space. And I mean, yeah,
we are in the game that I've been running. The party did go to the Astral Sea, which is effectively space. In D&D.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. Okay, side tangent, because I was thinking about how we really do want to explore different aspects of a relationship. Like, the other character that my character is dating he was the one who wanted to go to space, got to go to space, do all these amazing things, share them with my character, sure, but then kind of flip that switch and be like, oh, we have to go back and deal with the war that's going on, and my character stepped up and basically in nicer terms than this was like, we are in space, it is romantic, get over here and kiss me before we leave, okay? Come on, let's just have a moment. Things like that. So that's an example.
But one of the things that you did touch on is, like, even using something like a tabletop role-playing game, we do talk a lot about Dungeons and Dragons. It's not only Dungeons and Dragons that we play. We have Exalted. Our friend Katie is working on her own game system that she wants to run us through. I have the Final Fantasy XIV TTRPG that I'm excited to run some of our friends through. But using these as a means to almost process through some of our life experiences. And this is very important. This was on my podcast that I released on things I've learned from D&D. The first 5 out of the 10 that I came up with is Dungeons and Dragons is not therapy. But it is. But it's not. It's not therapy.
But it is.
But it is.
Yes. You find that right group of people to play with, and it totally is therapy.
Yeah. So, I like to talk about a diverse group of people that we would define as heroes. I've already done a podcast on the hero's journey that I forget who came up with it. I was just looking it up yesterday. But it's kind of the 12 steps or so of the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell, he's the one who came up with...
Cool.
I think he's the one who came up with the hero's journey. But we all see things as heroic, and we see people as heroes in very different ways. So, in your perspective, Libby, what is, or what makes a hero?
So, my neurodivergence is probably going to come out with this, because the answer that I came up with for this question is probably the most non-flowery, weirdly scientific answer you're probably going to get out of anybody.
So you're setting the bar real high for this one, are we?
I guess, because of course I want to add... I want you to get specific, right? Like, this is like, get more specific. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Okay, so that's kind of a tick in the autism column, I'm just gonna say. A hero, to me, is as simple as someone... So a hero doesn't have to be a glamorous person. A hero is very simply someone who can look... I'm going to bring up my snow globe again, but is on the outside looking in for someone who's in a desperate situation. That they can contextualize this person's desperation and say, I can fix that. So... For example, I've been watching season 3 of Vox Machina, and they're fighting the big old war against the Red Dragon. So they're acting as heroes, trying to solve a problem for a desperate situation for a lot of people. This dragon is coming after. He wants to take over the world. They are stepping in as heroes, saying, "I can deal with that. I can fix that." They're high on the scale of grandeur. But a hero can also be someone ran out of gas and they're kind of stranded somewhere and they don't have any money. So you give them $20 to fill up their tank. You got them out of a desperate situation. You said, oh, hey, yeah, I can contextualize your problem, and here, I will fix it. Here's some gas money. To the person who is desperate, they got a hero in that moment to help them get out of that situation. So, to me, that's really all there is to it, is someone who can contextualize a desperate situation and say, yeah, I'll fix it.
I am going into my ability to quote movie lines, and I can just think of the Robots movie, see a need, fill a need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that.
Mm-hmm. I know that, like, little everyday acts might not be hero status in everyone's mind, but it is that...
But they are.
Yeah, but it is those moments where you make enough of an impact in someone else's life to cause good and change. I think that makes you a hero.
Having been someone who has worked in retail and the service industry as much as I have been very intentional about trying to be very cordial and joyous.
Have compassion.
Yeah, have compassion for people who are cashiers. Or drive-through and things like that.
Yeah.
And I have seen that with some of these people, of course, it's a matter of reciprocity. You're able to give what they're willing to give as well. But I have had some people, as I've just been like going through lanes and things, who have just opened up that, you know what, it hasn't really been that great of a day for them. And I'll just empathize with them, show some compassion. We'll start having a conversation. And I've actually had some people who have gone, for lack of a better way, their frown turned upside down. Mm-hmm. And it's those kind of things, those small acts, I feel, are oftentimes diminished more than they should be, because when we think of something heroic, we often think of some grand gesture, movement, or something like that, when sometimes it really is just that small little thing that can really pick someone up. And you see someone on the road who is downtrodden, and you help them get back on their feet. That is a much more heroic act than a lot of people give it credit.
I would agree.
Last question that I have is, who is a hero that has been influential in your life? Real or fictional?
Besides people like you, a business partner, family, friends.
I mean, you kind of already mentioned quite a few already.
Yeah. I was trying to think about who in my life, besides those people literally around me, do I find influential. And it turns out that is a very small amount of people. Like, we stopped watching mainstream media, regular TV. I don't even think I've really watched it since high school, actually.
We have not had a traditional television service since we've been married.
Yeah, ever. And not to say, we watch some shows. And if I were to pick one like mainstream media character that I would say is heroic or influential, my favorite TV show ever is The Middle. It doesn't 100% hold up to the test of time, but the character of Sue Heck, if you've ever watched the show, she is just kind of this shining beacon of positivity and being able to push through anything. So if I were to pick a mainstream character, I would go with someone like her, because the characteristics of her and her persona just do leave you feeling good and feeling like things are going to be okay. My problem with that is that it doesn't matter what kind of mainstream media it is, it feels fake. It's very constructed in a particular way. It's not genuine. And so the people who have real influence on me and my life need to be more genuine than that. She's playing a character, and it feels like she's playing a character. So if it's not real in a way, in my mind, it kind of doesn't count. So that narrows my field to, like, we've been watching YouTube for basically our entire marriage as well. Now, you want to talk about fake? I mean, YouTube is also super fake. But there is an air of more genuineness in the YouTubers we watch than you would find in mainstream media. Mm-hmm. They're still putting on a persona. They're still putting on a show and entertainment. And so it's worth it to be mindful of that and know that you don't know everything about them. So I kind of took it to mean, like, I honestly couldn't think of any fictional people, because fictional people almost don't stick with me the same way. I could say someone like Hermione Granger, or I love the Mercy Thompson series. So you've got Mercy Thompson.
There's also Sailor Moon. You grew up on Sailor Moon.
Oh yeah, I grew up on Sailor Moon. Oh, she was so whiny though. Oh my god.
No, but I'm talking the franchise. Not necessarily that she would be the hero, but there's more than just Sailor Moon depicted there.
Yeah. And here's another take in a neurodivergence column. Those don't resonate with me the way that I think they would neurotypical people. So that narrowed my list down to, if I'm going outside of my inner circle, like, okay, who are the most famous people I know or I have spoken to personally?
Well,
it doesn't. I know it doesn't have to be someone I know.
Doesn't have to be
famous.
It
doesn't have to be famous. It doesn't have to be someone I know personally. But to me, someone who has been most influential in my life is someone I know somewhat on a personal level. Mm-hmm. The personableness is important to me. And so if I were to say someone that some other people might actually know, the only people who would tick that box would be the YouTubers Evan and Caitlin. I have been in their community for about 5 years now. I get to talk to them on occasion, and they are probably they are the most famous YouTubers I know, influential in terms of a heroicness. So here's where the caveats come in for what I consider hero, is that it's almost a parallel to like a rags to riches story, where someone who, as an influencer, is more heroic in their influence can't forget common people. So a lot of the really big YouTubers these days, it's not that they haven't forgotten their roots, but their personas have gotten to the point where I can't relate to them the same way. One of the reasons I like Evan and Caitlin so much is they've always been personable from the start. But even so the other hard part of this question, here you go, checking off more of those neurodivergent boxes about how specific do we want to get here? Even in any rags to riches story, so few of them are actually true in terms of influencers, because they don't necessarily openly talk about where they started. And so you never know, unless some of them have, but it's not exactly the position where you thought they were. So there's the factor of where you live. If you live in the US, you're already in a certain bracket of influence. If you grew up middle class, you're already at a more advantageous position in order to do something like become an influencer. If you got a theater degree, there are plenty of smaller time YouTubers that I watch that over the years have unraveled their story of, oh, they got their start in theater. Oh, they grew up in LA. Oh, those give you an edge in terms of becoming a popular influencer.
They can.
Yeah. You have to be incredibly lucky in order to break through without those benefits, that starting point. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent to say that the people who have influence in my life, the genuineness that I appreciate tends to come from people who didn't necessarily have the class influence, the location, the generational wealth. Anyway, all that to say is it boils down to, as much as I love Evan and Caitlin, to call them heroic goes a little bit against the expectation that they really pulled up their bootstraps. But I also can't say that they didn't, because they did. The person I landed on ultimately, is a little bit of an interesting pick, I think. Oh, you're gonna laugh when you hear who it is. It's interesting because who is a hero but who is also influential is it's a tiny little sliver of that Venn diagram in my brain. And so I would say that this person doesn't check both sides of that box. But it's the best person that I could come up with who I actually feel is genuine, but uses his influence for driving community and just being his best self. And that person is Matt Mercer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
Oh, really?
I'm not surprised.
You're not surprised? Mm-mm. I watch a lot of Critical Role. I wouldn't call myself a huge in their community. I have a lot of catching up to do. But in terms of his rags to riches stories, now he did a beautiful interview. Gosh, I wish... Oh, I can't remember who he interviewed with, but he did a beautiful interview where he talked about his upbringing and where he started and where he ended up today. Now, did he truly start from rags to riches? That's up for debate, because the one thing that did start him off early with the right influence is that he moved to LA when he was a kid. So he's already in the heart of the entertainment industry. But he also, as a kid, had to overcome a stutter and go through typical school, things like that, and with a family that did not make a lot of money. He did grow up in the one area where success is higher than pretty much anywhere else in the world. But through his dedication to the things that he loved, which was crafting stories, crafting worlds, being part of nerdy communities, and just being able to live out his fantasies in a way that brings communities together and is just a showcase of him giving his best self every single step of the way. He is now getting to be a pretty famous voice actor. He started out doing very small jobs. He started out voicing a character for a game that he also QA tested, and the game was not very good. But you know what? He put his passion into it anyway, to the point where now he is far enough in his career that he's getting some of his dream roles. He got to play Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom.
He was a Vincent in Final Fantasy VII.
He has gotten... So this is one of the reasons that I like Matt, is that I know Matt has a persona, just like any other influencer. He has a persona. He puts on a performance. His individual life is not the same as his life behind the camera, obviously. But I do see the genuineness in his humility in how far he's gotten. And I don't see that humility with a lot of other influencers, even ones that I care about. With Matt, one of the things that made me realize that he's different. It's just an anecdote that I know, is that his role as Vincent, one thing that I think was interesting is that he was not originally called to voice Vincent. And the fact that the game studio knew him enough and knew that they were able to surprise him, that he had enough love from these people around him that the people casting the role and announcing it to him had him come in and read and say he was going to read lines for some, rando characters in the Final Fantasy VII remake. And they were able to reveal and surprise to him through like a PowerPoint presentation as he's reading these lines off his tablet that he's going to be playing Vincent. And he broke down. And this is one of his dream roles. And it wasn't the number one dream role, I'll put that caveat in there, but it was a dream role. And the fact that he was able to have that, like, people curate that experience for him because of who he is and where he started and where he'd come from. Like that's just a moment in time that's so human. And so Critical Role, I mean, it has become such a huge franchise, but I also love the fact that it is a group of voice actors who work damn hard at being good friends to each other, and you can't run a successful business like they have without a lot of respect, a lot of communication, and a lot of curating a community of drawing people into your passion and trying to spread love through drawing people into your passion and giving your best self in order to bring other people joy. So that's why I picked Matt.
Yeah. I jive with all of those reasons.
Yay. I'm glad. I mean, nobody's perfect. And I do know the Critical Role community in itself can at times be seen as toxic. You kind of get that with any community. So what I'm talking about in community as in their presence being genuine to their fans, and in that way almost like giving love to people through their passions. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing your insights.
Thank you for having me.
And
Valentine's Day.
yes.
Seems fitting.
Yes, it does. And my chair still likes to click at me from time to time.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. So I do just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to, come from just down the hall in order to record this. But thank you so much. And I really do appreciate you coming in with your insights and just sharing from your own experience, because just Matt Mercer, as soon as you're like, this is someone that I find quite heroic, that isn't someone that I would have initially considered as a hero. Granted, I don't have that I have a very exhausted list right now. And I want to continue adding more. But as you were describing him, I'm like, oh yeah, hell yeah, I can see why you would see that he's a hero. That's gonna be it for this month's hero study. We will see who's gonna be either interviewed or just researched for next month. And I can't thank you enough. I've really been waiting for a good while to be able to do this. And I hope that you guys found some inspiration from Libby's story and from her perspective on what it is to... You did talk a lot about getting between the covers of your story.
Yeah.
So it's a very important thing, and we will just keep trucking along as best as we can. And until next time, live strong for today.
Bye.